Let's turn now to this question of what is microeconomics? What's this topic we're going to be studying over the course? But before we answer that, we need to answer a broader question. What is economics? What is this broad field? There, I think the best definition I've found is that economics is the study of human action. This very broad definition will capture a lot of the ideas we often have about economics, like economics is something to do with supply and demand, or cash flow, or income, or how we use resources. Defining economics as the study of human action will capture all of that. And it's actually a definition that I pull from Ludwig von Mises from his own book called Human Action, appropriately enough, in which he is more or less saying that what economists have been doing throughout the years, though we may not have realized it, is we're just studying human action. Now by this he means we're studying the action axiom. The action axiom is simply the fact that humans act. Put a little bit more precisely, this means that humans behave purposefully. That is, that we have purposes, we come up with goals, and we try to achieve those goals. We do things to try to achieve them. Put another way, we could expand this out some more and say that humans apply means to attain ends according to ideas. Now all this really requires is that I have some kind of goal in mind, and that I'm doing something to try to achieve that goal, because I think the goal and what I'm doing are connected. That is, the means and the ends are connected according to the idea that I have. It might be something where I'll be successful, it might be something where I won't. For example, I might very well have the goal of sating my thirst, and have the means of a jug of water sitting near me in my labor that can pick up that jug and pour the water in my mouth. Right? That's my means. If I have the idea that it's connected to my ends of sating my thirst, then I will probably be successful if I do actually apply those means to attain that end. At the same time, I could apply means to attain ends according to ideas that are wrong or, in some sense, crazy. For example, I might have the goal of ending up in Florida instead of here in Ohio where I normally am. I want to be in Florida. I have the means of flapping my arms. I have some idea in my mind that these two are connected. If I flap my arms fast enough, I'm going to end up in Florida. Now, of course, we know that's not actually what's going to happen. In this case, my action will fail. Yet it is, at the same time, still an action, and therefore still something that we can study in economics. After all, failure is something that occasionally happens in the economy. We call that error. Now that we know what economics is, let's divide micro and macroeconomics. I'm sure my Greek scholars will tell me that micro means small, so microeconomics then would naturally study the small level, or we'd focus in at the smaller units, while macroeconomics is large, so we look at the larger scale. Let's focus on macro first. Right, macro, looking at the large scale. Here we have phenomena like economic growth. Over the past 400 years, there's been phenomenal economic growth throughout what we call the developed and the developing world as well. Where we are far wealthier, we have all kinds of conveniences that were not even thought of 400 years ago, where even the kings ruling over various empires 400 years ago did not have some of the conveniences that a normal person in the United States would have. For example, I can turn on my air conditioning if it's too hot outside. I can turn on my furnace if it's too cold. I can pick up my cell phone and call my wife, who might possibly be across the country traveling. I can do that and communicate with her instantly. These are things that are not even thought of as a possibility 400 years ago. Yet now, because of the development of technology and science, we can actually do these things. As a result, we ended up with significant economic growth. A second topic that would be macro would be inflation. Inflation is generally defined as a general rise in the price level. That is, things on the whole are getting more expensive, or the cost of living is going up. This is a huge, broad phenomenon that is very important, but it's also a macroeconomic topic. Business cycles, or the booms and busts the economy goes through, where it seems like businesses are all doing well, and then all of a sudden they're all doing poorly, all roughly at the same time. This is a business cycle, and it's a large-scale phenomenon, something you'd study in macroeconomics. Unemployment kind of fits under the macroeconomic spectrum. In a sense, a lot of unemployment is related to business cycles. During the boom and during the bust. During the boom, lots of people can get jobs relatively easily. During the bust, it's very difficult to find jobs, and lots of people get laid off. And as far as that's our explanation, unemployment would be considered a macroeconomic topic. At the same time, there is some level of unemployment that might come just from what's happening inside the labor market itself that may not necessarily be the result of what's happening in the overall economy. And as far as we talk about unemployment because of those reasons, it would actually be a microeconomic topic. So we'll be talking about unemployment and labor markets in this course. Microeconomics, then, focuses on the small scale. What is the smallest scale that we can really think of in an economic science? Really, we have to start at the individual. It is, after all, the individual human being that is acting. Therefore, the individual will be the unit of analysis in microeconomics. We start at the individual, we call that methodological individualism, start at the individual, and then build up groups from there, remembering that groups are always composed of individual people. Now, still, we would consider us to be at the micro level when we look at, say, household decisions. It may not be one individual person, so it's a handful of people working together toward common goals. Here we can still look at that at micro. It's a small part of the overall economy. Individual firms are very similar. An individual business is normally very small compared to the economy as a whole, therefore it's something we might study under microeconomics. Or an individual market, say the market for t-shirts or dress pants. These are individual markets that are a relatively small part of the economy. We can study those in microeconomics. More broadly speaking, there are a number of microeconomic topics that we might discuss. For example, prices. Where do prices come from? Why is the price of whatever it is? That's something that microeconomics explains, and I think it's fair to say that's really the heart of microeconomics. We also look at the role of profits and also losses. Profits and losses are a phenomenon that you experience at the individual firm level. Therefore, it's something that in microeconomics we can talk about. Also, private property rights are something we talk about in microeconomics. Though we may not necessarily place a lot of emphasis on this, it does underlie everything. For example, a price. Prices only really make sense if I, as the buyer, own the money that I have to pay for the thing. If I don't own that money, if I don't have private property in that money, then it doesn't actually mean anything for me to say that I'm willing to exchange it. It's not mine. Right? Similarly, the thing that I'm buying, the person who's selling it to me better own it before we start the exchange. So private property does underlie everything we're doing. In a sense, I think it's fair to say that the market system is really built upon prices, profits, and property rights. In addition to these topics, we can also talk about the market structure, or competitive environment. That is, am I, as a business, the only show in town? My market is structured that way, where I am, in a sense, a monopoly? Or am I having to face fierce competition from other firms that are doing very similar things to what I'm doing? That is, am I in a competitive environment? That's something that we can study, because we're talking about individual firms in an individual market. Insurance is also a pretty big topic in microeconomics nowadays. Really just looking at the individual level, how does that affect insurance markets, both from firms and also from the individual people looking for insurance? Now to answer one last question. Why should you bother studying microeconomics? Well, now, on the one hand, it is true that if you're enrolled in a course, studying microeconomics will get you some credit that will help you graduate from college or something like that. At the same time, I think that there are a number of benefits that we get from studying microeconomics. One is that we should make better personal decisions. For example, you might say throw a frisbee better if you have some sense about physics. Right? The same is true of economics. You can make better personal decisions, that is, you as a human being can choose more appropriate actions if you have an understanding about how human action actually works. So that's the underlying idea here. Also, some of the later lectures actually really revolve around this question of how can we make better personal decisions. We do speak to this issue very directly. Secondly, there's the issue of business strategy. Most people in our world are going to work in business in some way, and you want that business to succeed, whether you are a manager or whether you're simply an employee. As long as that business is profitable, they very well may stay in business and you get job security. If the business is not profitable, there is no way the business can stay in business. You will eventually have to lose your job. So we want businesses to do well. How can they decide to do well? Well, that is something that we can talk about in microeconomics. How should businesses respond, say, once they know which market structure they're in? Right? Now, I may not be able to teach you how to run a multi-million-dollar company if I knew I would probably be running a multi-million-dollar company, I can at least give you some rough guidelines to help you make major mistakes that some businesses might make if they were not informed about the things we're going to talk about in this course. Finally, there's the issue of policy making. Those of us who live in democratic countries or a representative democracy like, say, the United States are, in our own way, policymakers. Every time we go and we vote for a politician, we are voting into office the policies that they are proposing. So it'd be very nice for us to know if these policies are actually going to create a society in which we will actually want to live. So understanding economic policy and how microeconomics relates to the analysis of economic policy is something that is very important for anyone who might vote for a representative or makes perhaps a direct analysis of these policies, perhaps because they are the policymakers themselves. Right? So being able to understand policymaking is a very important thing. So my hope is that at the end of the course, that you'll be able to make better decisions in your personal life, also in your career, and finally as a citizen of the country in which you live.